So everyone's situation is different. I'm from the small town of Geyserville. I happened to be in Coffee Park in 2017 during the Tubbs fire, and I've been on most of the other major fires in this county. So some folks are in the hills in very remote areas, surrounded by vegetation, can't even see their neighbor. Others are in a dense neighborhood where their neighbor is maybe 20 feet away. And others are in an intermix area where you can see your neighbor, but there is some vegetation between you, between houses. So in all those different situations, it still comes down to two principles: defensible space and structural ignitability, or how your house is built. And in an urban area where your neighbor is 20, 30 feet from you, structural ignitability or house to house ignition is more important than vegetation management. So just think about that. You're really dependent upon your neighbor. In a wildland area, in a very rural area where you can't see your neighbor, it's more important. You can do more managing your land, doing vegetation management in conjunction with how your house is built to save your house. And then in the intermix area, it's a combination where a neighbor's house catches fire, those embers are going to probably impinge on your house on a windy night. And so it's more a combination of defensible space and also vegetation management on your property combined with how your structure is built. So think about it. There's two different situations, three different generalized situations. All those are dependent upon your neighbor, but if you live in a real urban dense neighborhood, it's really about working with your neighbor. So I'll pick on Geyserville because that's where I'm from. We could have a scenario on a windy night where one house catches fire and it goes house to house independent of a vegetation fire. And that's really scary to me because the fire department can only react so quickly, can only send so many firefighters. Every major fire has had a water failure of some sort, whether we ran out of water, there was not enough water to start with to sustain fire suppression, fire attack. And so we're going to be outnumbered really quickly. And so neighbors helping neighbors, working with your neighbor, there's only so much I can do as government, only so much that the law requires. And one of the local initiatives is now come to be known as Communities Organized to Prepare for Emergencies, or COPE. It started in Oakmont well before the 2017 fires. It gained a lot more attention at least here locally in Geyserville in 2017 after the Pocket Fire, which was a fire here in northern Sonoma County. Obviously, there was the 2017 Tubbs, the 2017 Nuns, but here was the Pocket Fire that really provided momentum in downtown Geyserville because an ember from the hills, which then we later saw in the 2019 Kincaid Fire, could land in Geyserville, and now we could have house-to-house ignition, and all the firefighters are up in the hills, up in the mountains, trying to stop the edge of the fire, trying to do perimeter control. So COPE, Communities Organized to Prepare for Emergencies, was a grassroots effort really to get just neighbors to get to know one another, a sense of community, and work on community benefit projects, encourage each other to mitigate their risk as a group, and how they can not let each other down, how they can help each other maybe evacuate an emergency, or if someone's not home, watch over somebody else's property. And it's really, in my opinion, I've been very proud to be involved with it. Just as a side note, in 2020, the Walbridge Fire came down on the community of Mill Creek, and because they had a COPE network that was developed after the 2017 fires, everybody was able to get out of Mill Creek, and there was no fatalities, no loss of life, and everyone that was in COPE was accounted for. And as a firefighter, that's great knowing. It's really sad that homes burned, but it's great knowing that everybody's out of the community and accounted for. And that was all done not through government doing that, but from grassroots effort, neighbor helping neighbor, and having an accountability system for your neighbor and for your community. So COPE is a great tool to get neighbors to help one another. Remember, there's only so much I can do to make neighbors get along. I can only go with what the law says. And many times I'll get a call trying to get a neighbor to talk to a neighbor, or a neighbor to help their neighbor out, and there's not much I can do. I can't insert myself into making people get along when there's a law not being broken. And as soon as I, as a government official, start enforcing the law, and whether you like me or not as a person, I now become an authoritarian. I got to stick to my corner. You get in your corner, and there's less likely chance we're going to get along. So COPE has provided a sense of trust. Don't let your neighbor down. How can we help each other out? And in a small town like Geyserville, in downtown Geyserville, that can make the difference. If we do have another Kincaid fire, or it's barreling down on the town of Geyserville, we were spared that morning, November 24th, 2019, because the wind shifted. But that fire could have easily came into Geyserville, or as I previously mentioned, one of my fears is we get a house fire and it goes house to house, independent of a wildland fire. So COPE, Communities Organized Prepare for Emergencies, is a great model. You don't have to use the official name if you don't want to. There's nothing official you need to do. You can call it whatever you want to call it. There's also Map Your Neighborhood. There's CERT programs. CERT's a little bit more about emergency response. COPE does not ask or require or even want you to do any type of response. It's just notify your neighbor, help your neighbor out. Also allows us then to go after grants together that are community benefit, and it's a great resource. So just remember, every one of us is in a different situation, whether you live in an urban, high density housing area, you live in the hills and the mountains where you can't even see your neighbor, or you live in an intermixed type of situation in between where you can see your neighbor but you still got some distance between one another. We're all in different situations. COPE's a great model. It's grassroots. It can fit your situation, and it ultimately provides you better access, better coordination, but better access to your government, to the fire department, to law enforcement, to get answers before the emergency, so you're best prepared as possible.